Okay, good afternoon. I'm giving this talk today, but it's actually Maureen Christie from the Friends of Shorebirds South East and that group that has been responsible for most of the work. I've renamed the title slightly to Science Informing Management of the Expanded South East Beach Cast Macroalgal Fishery, although a lot of that information is towards the end of the talk. First I'm going to talk about the beach cast macroalgal fishery. It's in the limestone coast, so southeast of South Australia. It's focused on macroalgae rather than seagrass, where there is a seagrass licence near Kingston, but I'm talking today about macroalgae. It's a single licence. Previously been referred to as a cottage industry, relatively small take, 80 wet tonnes per year, most of that from one area. And originally hand harvest only, but they have now developed to using mechanical harvesters. So the original licence conditions from the whole area from Cape Jaffa right down to south of Beachport, Riverlea Bay, from that area they could take up to 75% of the macroalgae present. Although it wasn't really defined at what scale the 25% had to be left. And the other condition was that none could be taken adjacent to conservation parks, which you can see there in green. That's also got the marine park zones there, but that hasn't imposed any restrictions on the take of macroalgae. Those conservation parks easily take up 25% of the coast, so effectively they could harvest from everywhere. That wasn't a big problem with a small industry, which was mainly focused on Riverlea Bay, where the processing plant is located. But there have been some recent developments. The licence holder has been bought by China's second largest processor of seaweed, and they've made a $20 million investment. And the state government has given significant support to expand the processing plant, and they have a performance indicator looking to increase production by about 100 times. So the fishery they desire to export, so they needed approval under the EPBC Act, and that involved public consultation. The Conservation Council and Friends of Shorebirds proposed a change to the 75% rule and wanted the closed areas and seasons, if necessary, to be focused on the shorebird distribution, the shorebirds that were reliant on beach cast macroalgae, and searches for nesting shorebirds before mechanical harvest. So the outcomes were the change of the 75% rule to a 50% rule. We had hoped that it might be so that some area was left on each and every beach, but that didn't happen. And the sites of international and national significance for shorebirds still weren't protected. And you can see the areas that they put aside for protection are the ones in the red, which includes the existing conservation parks and a few other areas. But the shorebird sites, the key sites in Wrights Bay and in Norah Craner and down in Riverlea Bay, aren't protected. Only the one near Beachport Conservation Park is. Now, partly that's a result of some flawed information. They sourced data from Juna, but somehow that data, when it was converted to GIS maps, didn't really tell the story. So we can see here for Ruddy Turnstone, it's just a blanket map of the whole area, which isn't particularly useful and doesn't really delineate the sort of the focus sites that have been found from 30 years of surveys. Similarly for sandling, or not similarly, but also for sandling, the key sites around Riverlea Bay and near Beachport aren't even shaded there at all. So there was some flawed information there that led to that first proposal. Fortunately, they went out for consultation again because there had been such significant change to their first proposal. So the second consultation phase, we recommended closed seasons to overlap with those areas of international significance, so that as well as the closed areas, you'd have closed seasons from September to April. So basically we were suggesting they needed a seasonal fishery. We also wanted no harvesting in habitat protection zones. We felt that 50% was too much. the limited available science that had been done was based on some field observations and modelling in Scotland, suggested that 10% would be ideal, but 10 to 30% may be acceptable, and anything more would lead to significant impacts with decades of recovery for shorebirds. We also wanted to see some area on each and every beach available for the shorebirds and left alone, and a monitoring program to confirm that they weren't being impacted. Well, we didn't get much of that, but we nearly got the first one. But the closed seasons were just from September to March. And the only problem with that is that April is really the most important month as the shorebirds start to fatten up in preparation for their migration to Asia. So we sought the statement of reasons from the federal government for their decision, and it was clear they had intended to protect shorebird habitat prior to migration, and even mentioned March and April. So we then came to the conclusion that their intention had been right, but their implementation they hadn't seen through properly. Unfortunately, there's a process whereby you can appeal to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, which the Friends of Shorebirds South East did. And that was heard in February, but didn't go through to the hearing. It was sorted out in mediation, and the outcome was a complete renegotiation of the approval conditions and the whole method of management. So the new approach was to limit harvest to just 8 days per month during those important periods for the migratory shorebirds. Harvesting by hand only, with the help of a winch, but not the big grappler that we saw in that photo in one of the early slides. And only 2 utes, 6 people in total involved in doing it, and targeting only the fresh kelp, which is good because there's some habitat partitioning whereby the shorebirds need the older beach rack. So obviously you need fresh rack to get older rack eventually, but for the last month or two, the last month or so, it's not so bad if they're only taking the fresh rack. So what really convinced Australian Kelp Products, the licence holder, and also the government, and this was backed up by an expert report that the federal government sought, was some additional science had been conducted by the Victorian Wader Study Group in conjunction with the Friends of Shorebirds South East. And they fitted light level geolocators to a number of birds. And these light level geolocators then record the light over a long period of time. And when they recaptured the birds on their return from Asia, they were able to tell from the light levels what positions they'd been in, so when they had left. And they found that for ruddy turnstone, that 81% of them left in the last week of April, and all of them sometime in April. And similarly for sanderling, most of them were late April and May. So that really confirmed the importance of April. Similarly, weight gain data showed that April was the most important month for both of those species. So that's been most have regarded as a satisfactory outcome, hoping for a monitoring program of some sort to verify that there are no impacts. There has been another application, and that's for the rest of the coastline from Riverlea Bay right down to the Victorian border. Significant shorebird sites haven't been identified or haven't been marked out, and no closed seasons were proposed, just again a number of closed areas accounting for 40% of the coast or thereabouts. But the problem is that coast is got areas of significance for shorebirds all the way along, so we believe that closed seasons are going to be important again. So we propose similar things for that. We're still waiting on the outcome. We understand there have been 56 submissions received on that one. But our takeaway messages and our recommendations are that the fishery review processes under the EPBC Act have proved to us to be a really good lever for improving management of fisheries. Also, shorebirds are a significant ecological feature that need to be properly considered when developing these beach cast macroalgal fisheries, and we didn't feel that that was the case initially. The available data needed to be identified and presented in a manner that clearly showed where the conflicts were, and that may have led to a sensible outcome earlier. And the high quality data collected by community groups certainly inform good management on this occasion, but we believe that a fishery independent monitoring program is required to confirm that shorebirds are not impacted. Thank you. Questions?